Have you ever written about something so much that it somehow became your reality? Imagine crafting steamy love stories about billionaire heartthrobs, only to find yourself staring into the eyes of a real-life tycoon who seems ripped straight from the pages of your book. That's exactly what happened to me. One day, I was typing away at my desk, dreaming up fictional meet-cuties and grand romantic gestures, and the next, I was living one. But here's the twist. Nothing about this love story went the way I planned. Secrets, scandals, and a whirlwind of emotions I never saw coming. If you've ever wondered if life could imitate art in the most unexpected ways, buckle up, because this is the story of how fiction collided with reality and changed everything. Let me ask you something. Do you believe in fate? Or do you think we're all just writing our own stories, one choice at a time? As a romance author, I've spent years selling the idea of destiny, of two souls meant to find each other against all odds. But when it actually happened to me, I wasn't ready for the messy, unpredictable, and downright terrifying truth behind the fantasy. This isn't just another billionaire romance trope. This is real. And if you've ever fantasized about a larger-than-life love story, you need to hear what happens when the fantasy becomes reality. Because the fairy tale isn't always what it seems. I won't lie to you, this journey wasn't all private jets and candlelit dinners. There were moments that made me question everything I thought I knew about love, power, and the fine line between fiction and real life. And that's exactly why I'm sharing this with you. Maybe you've been searching for answers about love, about whether those daydreams could ever come true. Maybe you've clicked on this video because, deep down, you're hoping for a sign that magic exists. Well, you're in the right place. By the end of this, you'll have the truth. Raw, unfiltered, and nothing like the books. So who am I? Just a writer who thought she had love all figured out, until he walked in. Tall, commanding, with a presence that could silence a room. A man who could have been the hero of any of my novels. Except he was flesh and blood, and the chemistry between us was anything but fictional. But here's the thing about billionaires. They don't play by the same rules as the rest of us. And the more I got to know him, the more I realized, the man behind the empire was nothing like the fantasy I'd been selling. I'll tell you everything. The intoxicating highs, the gut-wrenching lows, and the shocking moment I realized this wasn't just a fling. But before I do, ask yourself, what would you do if your wildest fantasy walked into your life? Would you run toward it? Or would you run away? Because I did both. And by the time you hear what happened next, you'll understand why this love story is one I could have never written myself. Before I met him, my life was predictable in the best way. I spent my days crafting love stories for readers who craved escape. Luxurious settings, brooding billionaires with hidden hearts of gold, and grand gestures that defied logic. My readers adored my books because they offered a fantasy, a world where love always won in the end. But my own love life? Let's just say it was far from the pages of my novels. I'd been burned before, and after a few too many disappointments, I'd convinced myself that real love was something that only existed in fiction. Then came the invitation. An exclusive literary gala in New York, one of those high society events where authors rub elbows with the elite. My publisher insisted I go, saying it would be great for networking. I almost said no. But something, call it fate, call it curiosity, made me book the ticket. The moment I walked into that ballroom, I felt out of place. Crystal chandeliers, champagne towers, women in couture gowns who looked like they'd never had a messy day in their lives. And then across the room, I saw him. He wasn't just handsome. He had this magnetic energy, like the air around him was charged. Our eyes locked, and for a second, the entire room faded away. I told myself it was nothing, just the thrill of being in a room full of powerful people. But then he was standing in front of me, introducing himself with a voice that sent shivers down my spine. "I've read your books," he said, like it was the most natural thing in the world. A billionaire who read romance novels? I should have known right then that nothing about him was going to be simple. We talked for hours that night. He was sharp, witty, and unlike any man I'd ever met. He didn't just ask about my work. He understood it, quoting lines from my books like they mattered to him. By the end of the evening, he'd slipped his number into my hand with a smirk and a challenge. "Call me when you're ready to stop writing about love and start living it." Cheesy? Absolutely. Effective? Unfortunately, yes. I spent the next week fighting the urge to text him, telling myself it was just infatuation, that men like him didn't fall for women like me. But then I did something reckless. I called him. And just like that, I was swept into his world. Private dinners, spontaneous trips, whispered promises that felt too good to be true. It was everything I'd ever written about. Until it wasn't. Because here's the thing about billionaires, they don't become billionaires by playing nice. The more time I spent with him, the more I noticed the cracks in the facade. The way his smile didn't always reach his eyes. The phone calls he'd taken another room, his voice dropping to a tone I didn't recognize. And then there were the rumors. Whispers about his business dealings, about people who'd crossed him and disappeared from his life overnight. I told myself it was just gossip, that powerful men always had enemies. But then I found the letter. A handwritten note tucked into one of his jackets, words that made my blood run cold. Asterisk. You know what happens if you walk away. Asterisk. Suddenly, my fairy tale felt more like a thriller. Who was this man, really? Was I falling in love with a hero? Or something far more dangerous? The worst part? I couldn't stop. Every warning sign only pulled me deeper, like I was trapped in one of my own plots. Except this time, there was no guarantee of a happy ending. And then came the night everything changed. The night I saw her in the background of his video call, a woman with tears in her eyes, mouthing two words that shattered my heart. Asterisk, help me. Asterisk. Now I'm stuck between the man I'm falling for and a truth that could destroy us both. Do I walk away and pretend none of this happened? Or do I dig deeper, risking everything to uncover the secrets he's keeping? Because one thing's for sure, this isn't the love story I thought I was living. And by the time you hear what happens next, you'll understand why some fantasies should stay exactly where they belong. In fiction. But it's too late for that now. I knew I should have walked away the moment I saw that woman's pleading eyes on his screen, but the heart doesn't listen to reason. It craves answers, even the kind that burn. I told myself there had to be an explanation. Maybe she was a disgruntled employee, an ex with a grudge, someone trying to sabotage what we had. But then the texts started coming. Messages from an unknown number, grainy photos of him in places he'd never told me he'd been, with people I didn't recognize. The final one was a single address and a time. Asterisk midnight. Come alone. Asterisk. It felt like a trap, but curiosity is a poison you drink hoping it'll kill someone else. I went. The warehouse was abandoned, the kind of place you'd see in a crime drama right before the protagonist makes a terrible mistake. My hands shook as I pushed open the rusted door, the smell of damp concrete hitting me like a warning. And then I saw her, the woman from the video call, standing in the shadows with a bruise on her cheek and a fire in her eyes. You need to leave him, she said, her voice raw. Before you end up like me. That's when she told me the truth. He wasn't just a billionaire. He was a man who collected people, who wove them into his life until they were trapped in a web of favors, debts, and secrets. She'd been his assistant once, his lover, his collateral. And now, she was his problem. I wanted to scream, to deny it, to believe she was lying. But then she handed me a file, bank statements, contracts, a list of names with dates next to them. Some were crossed out. My stomach turned as I recognized one. The CEO of a rival company who'd mysteriously vanished 6 months ago. The pieces clicked together in the worst way possible. The luxurious trips, the way he always paid in cash, the way he'd smile when I asked too many questions. Asterisk, you're so much smarter than the others. Asterisk, had that been a compliment? Or a threat? I ran that night, my heart pounding like it wanted to escape my chest. But running from a man like him isn't that simple. The next morning, a single rose appeared on my doorstep with a note in his handwriting. Asterisk, you've always loved my twists. Wait until you see this one. Asterisk. That's when I realized, I wasn't just a fling to him. I was part of a game, one he'd been playing long before we met. And the worst part? I didn't know if I was the prize or the pawn. Now, every shadow feels like it's watching me. Every phone call could be him. Every knock at the door could be the end. But I'm not the damsel in distress I used to write about. I'm the woman who's about to fight back. Because I have one advantage he never saw coming. I know how a story should end. And if he thinks this one ends with me broken or begging, he's forgotten who the real storyteller is. But the clock is ticking. And the next move? It's mine. Stay tuned. Because the truth? It's stranger and more thrilling than fiction. I knew I couldn't outrun him. Not when his money and influence stretched into places I couldn't even imagine. So I did the one thing he'd never expect. I stopped running. Instead, I walked straight into his world, armed with nothing but the truth and the one thing he couldn't control: my words. I called him, my voice steady despite the storm inside me, and told him I knew everything. There was silence on the other end, the kind of quiet that feels like the calm before a hurricane. And then he laughed. Not the charming laugh that had once made my heart flutter, but something darker, colder. "I was wondering when you'd figure it out," he said. Asterisk. Most of them never do. Asterisk. That's when I realized the real game wasn't about money or power. It was about control. He didn't just want to own companies or manipulate deals. He wanted to own people, to bend their lives to his will like characters in a story he was writing. And I had been his latest obsession. But he'd made one fatal mistake. He'd underestimated the woman who'd spent her life crafting twists for a living. While he'd been watching me, I'd been watching him too. Every detail, every slip of the mask, every time he let his guard down just enough for me to see the real man behind the billionaire facade. And I'd documented it all. The final confrontation happened at his penthouse, the same place where we'd once shared champagne and whispered dreams under city lights. But this time, there were no illusions left. I laid it all out: the files, the recordings, the evidence that could unravel everything he'd built. For the first time, I saw something flicker in his eyes. Fear. "You don't know what you're playing with," he warned, his voice low and dangerous. But I just smiled. Asterisk. Neither do you. Asterisk, because I hadn't come alone. The woman from the warehouse was waiting outside with the police, along with 2 others I'd tracked down. Women who'd been pulled into his web and discarded when they stopped being useful. Together, we were a story he couldn't rewrite. The fallout was explosive. Headlines splashed across every major outlet, his empire crumbling in real time as the world learned the truth about the man behind the fortune. But the real twist? The one thing I never saw coming? As they led him away in handcuffs, he turned to me with something almost like respect. "You were always my favorite," he said. And for a heartbeat, I almost pitied him. Because in the end, he was just another villain who'd mistaken obsession for love. Now, months later, I'm sitting at my desk again, writing a new story, but this one's different. It's not a fairy tale. It's not a fantasy. It's the truth. And maybe that's the most powerful love story of all. The one where the heroine saves herself. So if you take anything from this, let it be this: real love shouldn't feel like a game. It shouldn't leave you looking over your shoulder or questioning your worth. And if it does, walk away. Because you, my love, deserve more than a villain's version of happily ever after. You deserve the real thing. And trust me, it's out there. But that's a story for another time. Meanwhile, Lana wasn't just some rich socialite. The more Jake pieced together, the more he realized she was playing a dangerous game. Security footage from his shop's exterior camera showed a black SUV idling across the street the day she dropped off the car. The same SUV that had followed her when she left. And then there were the phone calls, always in hushed tones, always ending with her snapping, asterisk, "I'm handling it." Asterisk, but handling what? Was she running from Crane? Working for him? Or was she something else entirely? A thief, a whistleblower, a woman caught in a web she couldn't escape? The next morning, Jake woke to the sound of his shop alarm blaring. Someone had broken in overnight. Nothing was stolen, but his computer, the one with the flash drive still plugged in, had been wiped clean. And scrawled across the garage door in red spray paint was a single word: stop. That's when the text started. Unknown number. No hello, no explanation. Just an address and a time. Asterisk, midnight. Come alone. Asterisk, Jake knew it was a trap. He also knew he couldn't walk away. Because somewhere between the lies and the Lamborghini, he'd made a choice. He was in this now, whether he liked it or not. But here's the twist. Lana wasn't the only one with secrets. Jake had a past of his own, one he'd buried under engine grease and late-night shifts. A past that involved a stint in the military, a dishonorable discharge, and a set of skills most mechanics didn't have. Skills that might just keep him alive if things went south. Because if there was one thing he'd learned in his years under the hood, it was this: the most dangerous problems weren't the ones you could see. They were the ones hiding in plain sight, waiting for the right moment to explode. And as for that briefcase? Let's just say Jake wasn't the only one who knew about it. Because when he finally worked up the nerve to peek inside, he found something that changed everything. Something that connected Lana, Crane, and a shadowy organization that didn't officially exist. But that's a story for another time. For now, all you need to know is this. When Jake showed up at that address at midnight, he wasn't just walking into a trap. He was walking into a war. And the only question left was, whose side was Lana really on? The address led Jake to an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city, the kind of place where screams wouldn't be heard and bodies wouldn't be found. The moment he stepped inside, the door slammed shut behind him, and the muzzle of a gun pressed into his back. A voice, cold, calculated, whispered asterisk. You should have left it alone, mechanic. Asterisk, but before the trigger could be pulled, headlights flooded the room, and the roar of a familiar engine echoed through the empty space. The Lamborghini. Lana. She wasn't alone. Two armed men flanked her as she stepped out, her eyes locking onto Jake's with a mix of fury and something else, desperation. Let him go, she demanded. Asterisk. He doesn't know anything. Asterisk, but the man holding Jake just laughed. Asterisk. Oh, he knows enough. Asterisk. That's when everything exploded into chaos. Gunfire erupted, and Jake hit the ground, rolling behind a stack of crates as bullets tore through the air. Lana's men were good, but their attackers were better. Within seconds, the warehouse became a war zone. Jake's military instincts kicked in. He moved fast, disarming one of the assailants with a well-placed wrench to the kneecap. But the real shock came when he saw her. Lana, moving like a trained operative, taking down men twice her size with brutal efficiency. This wasn't the nervous socialite who'd brought him a car to fix. This was someone else entirely. When the last gunman fell, the warehouse fell silent except for the sound of their ragged breathing. Lana turned to Jake, her expression unreadable. You shouldn't have come, she said. But Jake just shook his head. Asterisk. You shouldn't have lied. Asterisk. The truth, when it finally came, was worse than Jake could have imagined. Lana wasn't Victor Crane's fiancée. She was his sister. And the flash drive? It contained proof that Crane had been laundering money through shell companies, funding illegal arms deals, and worse, eliminating anyone who got in his way, including his own family. Lana had been trying to expose him, but Crane's reach was too far, his enemies too powerful. The briefcase in the trunk? It held the only physical evidence, documents, ledgers, a recorded confession, that could bring him down. I needed someone nobody would suspect, Lana admitted, her voice breaking. Asterisk. A mechanic. A stranger. Someone he'd never see coming. Asterisk. Jake had been a pawn in a game he never signed up for. But now he was all in. The final showdown happened at Crane's penthouse, high above the city where the elite played God. Jake and Lana slipped past security, the flash drive's data now uploaded to every major news outlet with a 10-minute delay. They just had to survive long enough for the world to see it. Crane was waiting for them, calm as ever, sipping expensive whiskey like he hadn't a care in the world. Lana, he sighed, asterisk, always the sentimental one. Asterisk. Then he pulled a gun. What happened next was a blur. Lana lunged, Jake tackled Crane to the ground, and the gun went off. When the smoke cleared, Crane was disarmed, his perfect suit rumpled, his empire crumbling in real time as the news alerts began pinging across every screen in the room. The police sirens wailed in the distance. It was over. But here's the twist. Just when Jake thought they'd won, Lana grabbed his hand and pressed a key into his palm. The Lamborghini's key. Keep it, she said. Asterisk. Consider it a thank you. Asterisk. Then she kissed him. Quick, fierce, and gone before he could react. By the time the authorities stormed in, Lana had vanished, leaving behind only a note. Asterisk. Some roads are better traveled alone. Asterisk. Jake never saw her again. The car? He kept it, though he never drove it. Some things, he figured, were better left as reminders of a love that burned too fast, a danger that changed him forever, and the one truth he'd learned through it all: the most priceless things in life aren't under the hood. They're behind the wheel. So what's the takeaway? Maybe it's that love and danger ride the same road. Maybe it's that ordinary people are capable of extraordinary things when pushed. Or maybe it's simpler than that. Sometimes, you don't find the story. The story finds you. And if you're lucky, you survive it. So tell me, what would you have done in Jake's shoes? Would you have walked away? Or would you have revved the engine and raced straight into the storm? Let me know in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe, because the next story? It's even wilder than this one. The months after Crane's arrest should have been peaceful, But Jake found himself staring at the Lamborghini every night, its matte black finish gleaming under the shop lights like a ghost from another life. The car was worth a fortune, but selling it felt wrong, like erasing the last proof that any of it had been real. Then, on the one-year anniversary of that rainy Tuesday when Lana first walked into his shop, a package arrived with no return address. Inside was a single keycard to a private hangar at the city's executive airport and a note in familiar handwriting: "Some roads don't end." The security footage from Jake's shop that night showed a shadowy figure lingering near the Lamborghini. Someone who moved exactly like Lana but vanished before the motion lights could reveal her face.